Okay, so let's talk a little bit about exercises. And one of the challenges that we often have with our vessel customers is identifying what type of exercise they intend to conduct with us or are attempting to conduct with us when they give us a call on the phone. And so becomes very critical for us to be able to quickly identify. Of course, you have your qualified individual notification exercises, which are going to be by and large the bulk of the exercises that we're going to be doing. But these vessels have other exercises that are required by both their vessel response plans and their safety management systems that each company has incorporated to conduct. And many of these constitute emergency procedure exercises, things like fire drills, oil spills on deck, could be abandoned ship, man overboard, all kinds of different exercises that they'll be conducting. And then they have the remote assessment and consultation exercises, or RACE as we call them, where we're relaying a message to the salvage marine firefighter to get back to the vessel and provide some kind of consultation based on some information that they get from the vessel. As well as the in-office exercises that we conduct. These are exercises in which we develop the scenarios, consult with them, and the vessel services management team then goes out, typically is on site with them for a 2 to 3 hour exercise during that duration while they call into the command center. We activate an ERC to act as a duty qualified individual for that 2 to 3 hour exercise. And these ones are what we're now renaming a scheduled ship shore exercise. Okay, but as you can imagine from the perspective of a vessel, any exercise they're conducting that's not just shipboard would be a ship shore exercise, right? In the more general sense. And so when they come and they call us, they might use some of this different terminology, which may be confusing to us oftentimes. So the next one I want to talk about and more specifically jump into with the QI notifications they are quarterly. However, vessels that are not operating in the U.S. on a regular basis throughout the year have to have at least demonstrated that they've documented one within the last quarter, right? So the last 3 months. And to do that, we want them to call our 24-hour number. We've given them a new Houston number, the 281-606-4818 number to call. Their alternate number is the 985-781-0804. So oftentimes masters will call in on that line as well. But this gives them two options always, okay? And we're simply just doing a communications check with them. You'll find that sometimes the master will ask specifically the name of the person they're speaking with. And the reason they do that, I think it just goes out of courtesy or tradition over time. But they have in Section 5 of their plan a list of the qualified individuals. And so what has happened over time is some have erroneously thought that they need to hear the name of one of those individuals or get a confirmation from the person on the line that answers for the company that they are one of those listed individuals. So with the QI notifications, we're going to get those on a quarterly basis, and with respect to them asking specifically for a QI or ERC by name, there is no need to actually provide one. It's not a compliance requirement. It's just something that they've done out of habit. So we can reassure them that this is O'Brien's, and you can tell them whoever the duty QI or ERC is. You can give them that name. It doesn't hurt anything. But again, it's not a requirement. With the emergency procedure exercises, they actually have to conduct 4 of these a year, 1 quarterly, for their vessel response plans, but oftentimes they're going to conduct several more than that throughout the year, just to satisfy the requirements of their own company policies with their safety management system. And the Coast Guard wants them to have 2 of them involve a salvage and or marine firefighting component. So if they're doing a fire drill, they can document that as one of their salvage and marine firefighting emergency procedure exercises, right? And 2 of the other ones to involve oil spill in some way or fashion, okay? And it's easiest that they do those 2 of those 4 unannounced, because shipboard exercises by and large are easier to do unannounced, whether it be unannounced from the company's office to the captain and his crew, or just unannounced from the captain to his crew to test their capabilities. And it fulfills the Preparedness for Response Exercise Program guidelines put out by the Coast Guard for unannounced exercises. Now, we have told them historically that they can just record the exercises in their ship log. Oftentimes they will ask us to send an email follow-up to confirm, and that's just in essence doing two QI notifications, one via voice on the phone and one via email, which is duplicative and unnecessary. So we tell them just to record in the ship's log, but we did create a form for them that I'm going to share with you here momentarily, so you can see the form. I'm going to walk you through it so you can see the value of having developed this form for them to use. We had a form originally in 2006, and we went away from using it because of the fact that it just added an additional administrative burden for masters that they really didn't need to have. But before I show you the form, I want to talk a little bit about this remote assessment and consultation exercise. Currently, it's one exercise per year for each tank or non-tank vessel in the fleet that calls the United States. Now, in the regulations, the guidelines that are referenced in the regulations, it does state that these must be conducted in U.S. waters. However, the Coast Guard issued a frequently asked questions document that actually stated that they are allowed to do these outside of U.S. waters as long as they still follow the process and procedures to complete the exercise in accordance with the remainder of the guidelines. So how we do this is that they would call us as their QI because they have to activate their plan. And then they would state that they're conducting a remote assessment and consultation or RACE. And then we would relay the call to the identified salvage provider in their plan. Okay. Once we've done that, the salvage provider then has the responsibility, whoever the salvage professional, whether they be a naval architect or even a staff member that takes that call, they have an obligation then to contact the vessel back, which they often do via email, sometimes via phone. They have provided them in advance for the calendar year a scenario and some forms to fill out. They're going to ask the captain to make sure that they forward them that information. They'll take that information about the vessel stability, they'll review it with the scenario that they provided them, and they'll give them some consultation, okay, some advice of what to do. And then they'll send them a certificate and say they've completed this exercise. Now, they should not just be communicating directly with the master only, but they should be copying the designated person ashore, the company contact, the ship management company, and they should be copying the remote assessment and consultation exercise email distribution that we have, RACE or race@whitobryans.com. And I have that in my inbox so that I can monitor it as necessary, and so do a few other vessel management team members. So we don't actively use it, but we can kind of see if a customer requests us, if they've sent the documentation or not. If they're being slow at responding, we can take that up with the salver individually. So I want to show you a couple things, particularly before we move on in Vessel Pro. So here in Vessel Pro, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into an NTVRP, and I want to take a quick look at it and kind of show you a little bit of how to get around in it to identify the salvage company. So this is a non-tank vessel plan, and it has just one vessel in it. So while it be a fleet plan, that fleet is a fleet of one. There, in the Appendix D or the salvage appendix, you're going to find the salvage information of that provider. And this one, it ends with an acronym RMG, that stands for Resolved Marine Group. So if we click to that section and we scroll down, we're going to find here that their provider is Resolved Marine Group. Okay, it's listed right here in section 1. Okay, that's great, but what do you do when you open a plan and you see that there's 2 Appendix Ds, or for example, you don't see that there's 2 Appendix Ds because it doesn't fit in this window space, and there's actually an ability to scroll down here and there's another one there. So the foolproof way to actually verify the salver for a particular vessel is to click into the distribution record. Okay, why? Well, because in the distribution record, you're going to have a list of vessels by salver. Okay, and so if this had more vessels in it, you would see over here in this far column on the right who the salver is. So anytime there's multiple Appendix Ds, whether you recognize it or not, in a list of the vessels here in the distribution record, over to the right, you're going to have the corresponding one. Nowhere else in the plan is there a list of salvers by vessel except in the distribution record. So when we have multiple salvers listed in the same plan, it is critical that you verify it through the distribution record. That's the only place you're going to be able to determine, so we don't notify the wrong salver of a remote assessment, or even worse, an actual incident. Okay, so that's why I wanted to show you that. The next thing I want to go ahead and show you is actually this internal exercise documentation form. Okay, now this form, basically what it does for us here is it gives the vessel master a way to identify which type of exercise he's conducting. Now that we have a couple different types of exercises that they have to do with the vessel response plan, and more importantly, they have the ability to combine exercises. Okay, so what I want to do here is just talk about that for a minute. So if they're just doing a QI only notification exercise, they can tick the box here. If it's emergency procedure exercise, shipboard, they don't need to contact anybody. They just handle it on board right there. If they're doing their race with us, right, and their salver, well, then they can check here. The reality is that every time they do one of these remote assessments, who do they have to call to do it? They have to call us first, right? So typically what they're going to do is they're going to have a combined one. Separately, they can have a combined QI notification emergency procedure drill. And we've had some of these recently where they call in, they're doing an emergency procedure exercise. But to start out, they conduct a QI notification. So they're doing a 2-for-1. The idea here is that when they call in to us, they do the QI portion, and we confirm satisfactory communications. They are going to go on to finish their exercise shipboard. The master may say, well, is there anything else? And you can confirm. And by you, I mean the watch tenders even. You don't need to elevate this to the duty ERC or QI incident commander on the watch. You can reassure them that no further action is required on our part. Captain, please go ahead and finish your exercise on board. Thank you very much, and that's it. So please consider that next time you get some of those. Of course, with the emergency procedure exercises, since some of them involve salvage or marine firefighting, it would make sense that they would count one of their quarterly emergency procedure exercises also as their race. So use that scenario that the salvers have provided them to actually do the remote assessment and consultation exercise. It just makes good sense to do that. Lastly, and what could also happen is they could combine a QI notification, an emergency procedure, and a race, right? They could do all three. So really what this form is helping them to do, it's basically helping them to keep track of which exercise they do and take advantage in the way they document it to demonstrate to the Coast Guard that they've combined them. As we scroll down on the form, you're going to see they have a small section they can fill out with a description of the scenario or exercise, tick a box to meet objectives. There's some referential information here, any lessons learned or comments they want to include, and then a place for the master to sign, put his name, and stamp it like they typically do. Now, we remind them that we don't need a copy of these. Don't be emailing them to us as a QI. Just keep a copy of it with the vessel response plan on board the vessel. Okay? Now, effectively, what a ship has done by combining some of these exercises using our internal documentation form is that they can go from doing 9 shipboard exercises per year, including their 4 QI notifications, their 4 emergency procedure exercises and their 1 race, down to 4 exercises per year. Okay, and this is if they combine and document them appropriately. Of course, there was a little box on that form you may or may not have noticed where they could indicate if it was unannounced or not. It's a pretty important way to help make their lives a little bit easier operationally and still satisfy the requirements. So there's another exercise program that the Coast Guard uses, and it's not a new program. It's been around a long time. They're called Government-Initiated Unannounced Exercises, or GUIs. And the program historically was used at facilities to verify that they had sufficient response equipment, that they knew how to deploy and maintain, and could do so within the time requirements. Within 1 hour, they needed to be able to boom their operations that are occurring at the terminal, and within 2 hours have a skimmer in the water. So they've recently, back in 2015, extended this program to include tank vessels. Now, they had been verifying it on tank vessels, obviously, at the terminals, but they were looking to extend that to the nearshore environment and even offshore environment where vessels often conduct ship-to-ship transfers. Okay, and so where two vessels connect themselves together and conduct a transfer of cargo over the water. Now, this typically is going to be your product, big petroleum tankers that are doing this at specialized authorized anchorages and such. They typically don't do this for a bunker or fuel transfer. Okay, so tank vessels are where the focus is of this, and what they call this is called average most probable discharge scenario. So the response equipment that they have to have available and in place if they do one of these GUIs is enough to meet 1% of the worst case discharge calculation from that vessel, or 50 barrels, whichever is greater. Okay, so typically we use 50 barrels spill as the AMPD, or average most probable discharge scenario, meaning they would have to envelop the entire vessel with a boom and have at least 1 skimmer in the water operational after 2 hours. Now, as you can imagine, we're talking about equipment deployment, and with deployment means there is a cost. So most of the OSROs are going to make them pay to deploy and demobilize that equipment. Okay, and this is an important point that we have to get to the customers to understand. Now, the Coast Guard, as they select these GUIs to do, if they're originally thinking to do 4 per fiscal year in each cap on the port zone, okay, which is October 1 to September 30th each year. The reality is they've only done 10 or 15 in this past year. So there's other priorities that supersede these, and this program really hasn't taken off for tank vessels near shore and offshore so much. And of course, the offshore ones, they have increased timeframes to meet that because they're not as close to the depots of equipment on shore. Okay, the Coast Guard would evaluate and provide exercise credit to them. But more importantly for us, what we need to understand is what actions did the vessel master take and what actions did we take on their behalf. So they would have had a coverage in place if they're going to be transferring cargo, okay, already with their OSRO or a local provider. So when they call us, the first thing that we're going to do is confirm that they've notified that provider to actually deploy the equipment. It's one thing to have the coverage in place, and there's a fee for that, but there's an additional step that if they don't notify them, they need to get off the phone with us, call them, and have them deploy the equipment. Understand that it's an actual GUI going on. Okay, we then would complete the regulatory notifications, the full plan activation, and there's a special documentation form that was created that you guys have on your SharePoint drive there that we would then fill in for the timeline of actions, the scenario and such. And then we would send that completed form both to the vessel master and to the company contact or designated person ashore, or DPA. Okay, that would help them satisfy the exercise requirements. Moving on, there are some other unannounced notification drills that are initiated by government entities These are just the QI portion, right? So there's nothing, no equipment deployment, nothing more to do. And there's 4 states on the West Coast that conduct these, California being the one that does it the most, probably Washington the second most, okay? Depending upon the resources they have, we try to emphasize to the fleets, the masters here, and this comes out of our master's guide, that they should call in when they have one of these state agency personnel on board and tell us it's a state initiated unannounced notification exercise. We even say repeat it 3 times, right? So we're trying to create a culture there. Now, that oftentimes does not happen. And when you're, as a watchstander, you're taking the information from them and they give you the location and they say, well, I'm in port or I'm at such and such berth or terminal, and they're in California, Washington, Oregon, or even Alaska, well, then it's obviously a state-initiated unannounced exercise, because they would never conduct a QI notification exercise in port. They would have done it prior to arriving in order to satisfy the regulations. So rest assured, if that happens, we need to initiate our internal procedures, because we do have to send some information back, a little bit of a report to the vessel and to California within 30 minutes of getting that call for them to pass one of these unannounced notification drills. California, of course, does unannounced incident management or spill management team exercises, and we had one in 2013. We had another one last year in 2017. We passed them with flying colors. They will initiate the exercise on a vessel, so you get a call in like a state-initiated notification, but California would have the master state that is actual incident management team or spill management team mobilization. And then, we have to do the full exercise, ramp up our people locally in California, for example, and then support them from Houston. Okay. So those don't happen very often, but they do from time to time. Now, we do have some vessel customers who have 24/7 dedicated numbers, ones that may be calling us and have special procedures and things, actions that we have to take, and you get the pop-ups to follow along. A few of them include Crowley, Fairport Yachts, Polar Tankers, Seabulk Fleet Management, and Valley Steamship. Seabulk Fleet Management, the procedure is as simple as when we call in to their dedicated line, we just need to send a follow-up email to Greg Doyle, okay? And that seems to be working pretty well. But each one of these have a couple little wrinkles or special procedures that we do above and beyond what we normally do for vessel customers, and that's why they have a dedicated line, okay? There's also the recent acquisition last year, Meredith Management Group. They had an emergency call-in number. That number, through the acquisition, we acquired, right? And therefore, the line is still active, and we have it forwarded to. So when they call in, the old Meredith number, it rings over into our command center, right? Now, since that time, all the Meredith customers that are actively operating have signed new contracts, have new O'Brien's plans, have the new O'Brien's numbers. But, there's that occasional vessel or shipmaster who, for some reason, his company didn't tell him. He's still got an old Meredith manual, or maybe he's got both on board. He didn't want to throw out the old one, didn't know what to do with it, and picks up the wrong one, and he calls that Meredith number instead of our number. Okay, so you have that out there. Then we have some unique customers like Great American Insurance, where we're providing the spill management team for their customers. A couple other ones like Kirby Offshore, we recently signed a contract with them, and Weeks Marine. So we just want to be aware of these, because we don't have a lot of them. We don't want a lot of them, specialized procedures. But for those that we do, we want to be astute to those. When their vessels call in, be able to identify. And the best way for us to do it is to have them have a dedicated line to make the pop-up procedures come right up and help walk us through the process as watchstanders and as ERCs. Now, response in Canada, this is something that's come up recently, and I want to just take a moment to kind of reiterate to everybody what our responsibilities and roles are here. As far as notifications, certainly We're contracted to provide notification services to Canada, even response services. But let's start with the notification aspect. So the regulatory agencies in Canada are Transport Canada. They're the Port State Control Authority, and they have an enforcement branch, operationally the Canadian Coast Guard as well. So notifications need to be made there. We also need to get a hold of the OSRO, the Oil Spill Response or Removal Organizations. In Canada, they're called CROs, or Certified Response Organizations. Okay, there's two of them. There's one on the west coast of Canada and one on the east coast of Canada, and they cover those areas. Okay, we of course have to also notify the owner operator, call the designated contact on Section 5 of their plan. Now, the vessel response plans don't cover Canada per se, and Canada doesn't have a vessel response plan requirement, but our contracts do state that we will provide those same client representation services. And they don't use the term qualified individual, they use the term authorized individual. Okay, there's a document called a Canada Declaration. It's a one-page document. If you will, it's the de facto vessel response plan in Canada. And in that, they designate that the master, the DPA or designated person ashore, as well as O'Brien's Response Management, are authorized individuals. And what are they authorized to do? They're authorized to make notifications and call out the certified response organizations in Canada. Okay. Now, as far as providing spill or incident management team support in Canada, the customer can request it and we can offer it. Obviously, we would have to get some other logistical things in place like visas to be able to work in Canada, and that process can be challenging at times. And it's also interesting that the way they've implemented the Incident Command System, ICS, in Canada is a bit different than here. The Unified Command is not quite the same, because the authority of the responsible party is a bit more diluted, in that the majority of the decisions are made by Transport Canada, the Canadian authorities. So, we're used to working in a unified command here in the United States, whereas we'd be more in a consultation role in Canada if we were to be mobilized to work a response in Canada, which is still can be a very useful role for our customers to have us involved in, but it is a bit different than what we do. Now, we do have Chief Engineer, Master Mariner, who is in Vancouver, British Columbia, so he's resident on the west coast of Canada, and he doesn't have any spill response experience per se, but he knows everything about vessels. So he's a person who resides in Canada, isn't going to need a visa to be able to get there, so we can always activate him and send him on board to be our eyes and ears to provide support to the master without any delay, as long as he's available to do so. Okay, so we do have some options to support our customers, even if we don't, or while we're trying to get visas in place, or if we can't provide full services like we would here in the United States. So just wanted to share that with everybody as well. As talking about some other aspects of the business, operational signatures, this is something we've discussed before, but just to reiterate it, it's important that we have one for O'Brien's, because we are acting in the capacity of O'Brien's Response Management as a subsidiary of Witt O'Brien's to all of our vessel customers. And this goes for the majority of our energy and oil and gas customers too. We are a subsidiary, and if our contracts are in the name of O'Brien's Response Management, then we kind of have to wear both hats a little bit. So we really shouldn't be using our Witt O'Brien's signature block when we're working with these customers. It's a minor thing, and most people don't pay much attention to it, but it's still important, and it can cause some confusion for customers. Important to keep your name and title in there, right? I'm going to say there's a few things that might be wrong with that one there. Our titles, we all have titles. chief widget maker, whatever it may be. But our titles and functions can change depending upon what our role is in the incident command system, how we're interacting with the customer in an exercise environment or a real event. And so, things like ERC, nobody really, it makes sense to us, emergency response coordinator, right? Or senior emergency response coordinator. But if we put the acronym there, or if we even use that, that might be our official title in the company, but it doesn't really, it doesn't mean much to the customer. They can't identify what that really is. Okay. To them, O'Brien's is the qualified individual. So if we're filling the qualified individual role, we should put qualified individual or duty incident commander, right? Again, duty watchstander. Okay, something like that. And it's important that we use a proper email address and domain. So you see here on this one, we have o'briensrm.com. While that's still operational, that's not the domain we want them to use. We want them to use the widowbryans.com domain because all of our email addresses are there. Okay. Also, this one uses C-Center. Well, that's not an address that we have in the vessel response plan. So unless you want vessel customers to start emailing you at that address, you don't want to use that one. In fact, I would recommend we only use command center at widowbryans.com with the vessel customers. There's enough of them, enough volume of traffic that comes in there, and we want to keep it consistent for them. Okay. We do have a website. It's good to have that on there as well. And I see we have the alternate 24-hour number here. We need to make sure we're using the one that they know, or we put both. Okay. Numbers would be just fine too. The other thing we often see sometimes is we've got all kinds of different fonts going on here, and it just doesn't look very professional. So while we're on the topic, just decided that to give an example where whatever font you use and all that good stuff, if we get some more guidance from marketing and how they want us to do that, that's great, but it needs to be consistent. This brings me to business cards for O'Brien's. We have a template out there. You're all welcome based on your functions within the company. Those that would need them to order these, EDAC has the template. Kiera also can be of assistance in this. We can get cards ordered for those that need them within the group. One thing that we would ask is whether you put the +1 or not, that's fine. And maybe we put both of the emergency assistance numbers on the cards in the back, because of course you're going to want to use them also for your oil and gas customers. But either way, we do have a card. I do note that on this proof document, which has been updated, there is a +1 on the back in the template. There is an S in o'briensrm.com. It's pointed out to me before. We fixed that on the actual cards that were printed, but this was just the proof document that we're using as a visual for you guys to see. If you don't have them, let's get you some. We're happy to help you with that. There's some other things with marketing that we see from time to time, and I know bringing this up, not looking to point out issues, but things that we just need to still work through. And some of them are not easy. They might seem easy. These come right out of documentation generated in Command Pro, and it's not easy to get some of that stuff updated into the system based on, the resources, the limited resources with software development and IT. But for example, the documents all say Widow O'Brien's at the top. They say Widow O'Brien's at the bottom, generated by Widow O'Brien's and then powered by Widow O'Brien's. And even that Widow O'Brien's logo to the right bottom corner in the footer, it's not our current logo for Widow O'Brien's even. Okay. But should we have Widow O'Brien's on there, or should we have O'Brien? So these are all things to think about, questions that I just throw out there. So things that, we can continue to work on over time as a group. With this, we just wanted to represent, vast majority of the companies that we represent, and this is just a few of them. smattering of across the globe, you can see that percentage-wise, we are supporting a lot more foreign flag companies than we are U.S. based companies, and by volume of vessel and volume of companies just in general. But it's pretty. I mean, the statistics are pretty big. I mean, 850 plus customers, 35, probably more than 40 countries now, and around 8,500 vessels. It's no small task. We can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. We got to do it together. Okay. And it's just important that we all kind of see who we're serving. And we tell our customers, sometimes your clients are our clients too, because a lot of these ship management companies, they're going to be hauling cargo for the oil majors, and we also have contracts for them for spill response and stuff. So it's a small world. There's a lot of connection points there, and them having and knowing that we have direct relationships with a lot of those companies who are their customers or that their clients have as well, can give them a bit of peace of mind that we have the experience and the understanding of what's necessary, and they can just have a greater level of comfort with the level of risk that they have in you choosing us as their provider, right? Because their customers use us as well. I want to talk a little bit about this aspect, and this kind of shows you the importance of this business or this aspect of our business, and this customer base. Particularly in those years where we don't have a lot of episodic revenue coming in from, be it hurricane recovery operations, debris removal, public assistance, which we've been blessed with. Last year and this year it continues to be ongoing. Those lean years, when it's just exercises, training, consulting, the retainer business that comes from our vessels in order for us to be of service to them if they have an episodic event, an oil spill or whatever, really is a big chunk, even 49% of our sustainable annual revenue on those lean years. Now, that being said, years like last year and even this year, it's not going to come anywhere close to that 49% of the company's total revenue. But it doesn't mean it's any less important, because those customers are expecting the same great service that they receive in any year. So that's the challenge that we have, is to remember that. And also know that 80% of our operational budget for emergency response activity comes from those retainers. It keeps the lights on, keeps us capable, able to do the jobs that we all love to do here. And while I know not any one of those customers is any more important than the other, collectively, that's a pretty important customer base for our company. We do have a global presence, as you well know. Our headquarters in DC, with senior management from the corporate side, and then here in Texas, in Houston, our operations center. And a lot of us are down here, obviously. A lot of stuff is going on there. Of course, we have some people over in Slidell. We've got people in California, Seattle, Anchorage area, and even Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey area. Beyond that, in vessel services, we have representatives overseas in London, Athens, Singapore, and Tokyo to help support the concentrations of customers that we have over there. And also in Panama, we have a joint venture there for vessels transiting the Panama canals. Okay, so just want you to be aware of where we're at, bouncing around. And here's the vessel services management team led by Mike Gallagher and myself. Then we have Kate Kelly, our director of compliance, Tom Millett, planning director, Dave Alcantara over the vessel technical program and attendance and boarding of vessels, Maris Dorville, who is assisting a lot with accounts receivable right now, but is a licensed broker and has been working with the Kofor business. Kiara McGrew, who is here in the Houston office, and she's my admin support coordinator for a lot of the logistics and things that we do. And then you have our three representatives overseas: Captain Kobashi, Suling Richelieu, and Captain Mittal in Singapore. If you have any questions, and please, if you do, reach out to us. The inquiry address is available to you 24/7, whether it's a customer related thing or just something internal. And having myself, Tom, Kiera, and the bulk of the vessel services admin team here on the same floor in the offices with you all. Come over, get to know us. Anytime you have any questions for us, reach out and let us know. We're always happy to help and want to be engaged and involved. We may seem like we're busy and running around with our heads cut off a little bit, but I think you guys understand that more than most because y'all get a lot of the calls from our customers too. And if they're not calling, they're emailing. So they keep us busy. The retainers are great to have, but it's a business that never sleeps, being in all different time zones around the world. And by needing to service the retainers to be able to get that money, we have to work throughout the year and be on call for them, not just for emergency response, but administratively as much as possible to help them with their compliance needs and concerns for the vessels operating, trading here to the U.S.